Navy took a swing, and now Army will as well. And with the stakes being even higher, and when I say take a swing, the site is Yankee Stadium. We got Steve Helwick here from Hustle Belt and Underdog Dynasty on SB Nation to help us break down Army football, as the Cadets are, of course, in the midst of a historic season. It's almost a return to the 1940s at 9-0, and they're about a 2-touchdown underdog against Notre Dame at Yankee Stadium. Steve, how you doing tonight?
I'm doing excellent, and it's kind of cool to be talking about Army with playoff stakes, undefeated, ranked matchup against Notre Dame late in the season. Not exactly what you were expecting heading into Army's first season, the EAAC, them just steamrolling through the conference and playing super meaningful games with playoff implications in November. But that's where Jeff Monken has this team. And this is going to be a pretty interesting game against Notre Dame because Army has not really been battle tested this season. All double-digit wins. They've trailed 3-0 against North Texas. That's their only time they've trailed this season. But then they're facing a Notre Dame team that really has had its foot on the gas ever since that Northern Illinois game. So this should be a pretty good one at Yankee Stadium, and excited to see how this one plays out.
I took in the Navy game. That was about 3 or 4 weeks ago. And then I also made some comparisons looking at Army's metrics, their total yardage, passing, rushing, yards per play, offensive and defensively, to try to compare and see, okay, somewhat similar schedule to Navy to a certain extent, although I think Navy's played a tougher schedule than Army. But Army has, in all those categories, I don't have the numbers right in front of me, but significantly better yards per play, yardage averages, pass efficiency numbers. All those are better than Navy on both sides of the ball. We know that Navy couldn't challenge Notre Dame. Now they played a very sloppy football game and did made mistakes in that game that are not indicative of Navy, that were unforced errors in that game. But in looking at Army, that, again, for obvious reasons, it's a direct comparison to Navy. How would you compare those teams, and how much better or worse do you think Army is than Navy, since we've already seen the midshipmen go up against the Irish?
It's funny because at the beginning of the season, when both programs were undefeated, there were some people saying, why is Army ranked higher than Navy when Navy has a much better win in Memphis? That Memphis team's currently 9-2. And I just would say the eye test. You watch Army and you watch Navy, and just Army controls their game so much better. And I think the main part that Army succeeds better than Navy is on the defensive side of the ball. Navy had a really good scoring defense up until that Notre Dame game, but that was just because they were getting so many stops in the red zone. They were letting teams drive on them, and I don't think that was sustainable to have, a 60% red zone defense all year. So you could see that Navy's defense was going to bend and kind of break eventually this year. Army's defense, that's been unmovable. It's been unflappable. And Army and Notre Dame both enter this game with top 3 scoring defenses in the country. So I think the defensive end is where Army is a lot more disciplined than Navy. They're second in the country in third down defense. They're second in the country at fourth down defense. So when the moment is the biggest, this Army defense always rises to the occasion and finds a way to get off the field. And it helps play into the entire Army formula of controlling the clock, controlling the game. And Army does that a lot better than Navy this year. Also, the offensive schemes are a bit different. Navy runs a wing T flex bone when Army runs more of a traditional triple option style offense. And Navy has been kind of deviating from that traditional triple option. They're passing a lot this year. They're a team. I mean, Blake Horvath has had 100 passing yards in most of his games this year, while Army's quarterback, Bryson Daly, he's content having fewer than 10 passes a game. And that's what the usual norm is at Army. He hasn't thrown more than 10 passes all year. So Army keeps things a lot more grounded than Navy. And I think they're better at keeping things grounded, as they have better slot backs, better fullback play than Navy's had this year in running the ball. So you see Army, they're at the top of nearly every statistic this year. They play smart. They play disciplined. They're top 5 in fewest penalties. They have the fewest turnovers committed in the country. They committed 2 in that North Texas game. Outside of that, they have 1 all year. So Army is just playing disciplined football. The only knock you can give Army at this moment is schedule. Who's their best win? I would say it's 6-4 East Carolina.
Good. Steve Helwick on the line from SB Nation's Hustle Belt and Underdog Dynasty, breaking down Army, big showdown against Notre Dame. And of course, Army breaking into the CFP rankings this past Tuesday at number 19, 9-0. For the first time in forever. Notre Dame comes in at 9-1, safely within the top 12, despite that NIU loss. Obviously, Steve, number of people across the country are going to see Army play football for the first time this season. Who are some of the people to look out for on both sides of the ball?
Well, Bryson Daly is definitely the quarterback that you're going to have to watch because he anchors so much of the offense. Against every FBS team Army has played this year, when Daly starts, he's had at least 110 rushing yards. So he is just a walking 110 rushing yard machine, and he scored multiple touchdowns in all but one game this year. So he controls that much of the rushing for this team. And teams know Daly's going to run the ball, but they still can't stop him because the other backs are so dangerous on this team. You look at some of the other runners on this team. Kanye Udo, he averages 7 yards a carry, has 9 touchdowns, explosive runner. Noah Short, he's also one of their top receivers. He's one of those slot backs, always running in motion, getting jet sweeps, getting end arounds, and he averages 11 yards per carry on 41 attempts this year. So that's a crazy average for a pretty substantial sample size. So Army has some pieces on offense that can really mess defenses up. So it's not just Bryson Daly, but Daly is the anchor that leads it all. In that one game that Daly missed against Air Force this year, Army struggled really scoring at their typical rate. They only won that game 20-3. That was their first game all season without a first drive touchdown. And that's their only game this season without a first drive touchdown, was that game against Air Force. So Daly is so instrumental to the offensive success of this team, and having him back healthy in the lineup is going to work wonders for Army. And also coming off the bye week is going to help because that Air Force game wasn't too long ago that he missed due to injury. And then on the defensive end, Army's defense, I said earlier, they're top in so many metrics defensively. I think they are only letting up right now 11 or 10.3 points per game, which is tied with Ohio State for first in the country. And I think the pieces that you want to watch here are the safeties. Max DiDomenico is one of their star safeties on the back end. Him and Casey Larkin, those are guys that get tackles for loss. They come up in the backfield strong. And if Notre Dame's going to pass this game, they're going to be the ones that are going to try to stop Riley Leonard from getting those passing yards up, because the only game Riley Leonard threw multiple interceptions this year is the game that they lost in Northern Illinois. So forcing those turnovers on the back end is vital for the Black Knights.
How much of a shot do you give Army against Notre Dame on Saturday night?
I don't know. I would probably say maybe 25% chance, I think, of Army winning this game. The thing is, Army has played so well. It's just textbook perfect football. If you just rip all the helmets off and know nothing about the strength of schedule, you'd think Army's as good as any team in the country. They've won every game commandingly. They haven't been a threat to lose a single game this year. 11 points over North Texas is their most narrow win of the year. And in that game, there were only 6 North Texas possessions. There were only 7 Army possessions. Army just tried to bleed the clock. They're second in the country in time of possession. So, I mean, they played perfect football. It's just they've beaten one team with a winning record, and that's ECU. So I just don't know what this matchup's going to look like. A lot of people are going to point out the Notre Dame Navy game and think that Navy's such a similar style to Army because they're both service academies that traditionally run the ball. Very different teams. But one thing you have to notice about that game is Navy actually ran the ball pretty well on Notre Dame. They averaged over 5 yards a carry. Blake Horvath did a pretty good job. He had a few breakaway runs in that game. What was the difference between that game? Navy could not get out of its own way. They committed 6 turnovers when they entered that game, I think, with just 1 or 2 turnovers all season. And Army has not been committing those turnovers. So if Notre Dame can really force Army into an ugly game, kind of like North Texas did last outing, that's where Notre Dame gets a big advantage. And then Notre Dame likes to run the ball. Army has a pretty good run defense, but we'll see what happens when Jeremiah Love and Riley Leonard go up against this Army team. So I do like Notre Dame in this one. I don't know how I'd like it with the spread because it depends how low scoring, how few possessions are in this game. I think the fewer possessions in this game, that benefits Army. The more possessions, the more time Notre Dame has to gain separation. That's going to favor the Fighting Irish.
That East Carolina team that Army defeated at 6-4, and Notre Dame obviously with the 1 loss, and the Navy game was 52-17. And as Steve mentions, I watched that game until it failed to be competitive. And was it one of those situations where Notre Dame forced the turnovers? Not most of them. They were mostly self-inflicted, balls bouncing off running backs' chests on pitch plays, that sort of thing. So Navy never gave themselves a chance in that game. Steve Helwick, catch his work at Underdog Dynasty and Hustle Belt on SB Nation. Please like and subscribe right here, the voice of college football. Steve, we appreciate you stopping by. And just to let everyone know where they can find you and also what games you're going to this weekend.
Yeah, it's all up on the screen right now with my Twitter handle there and some of the platforms I write for. Hustle Belt and Underdog Dynasty, based out of Houston, so a lot of coverage on Houston and Rice on a weekly basis, but I'll cover all 134, talk football with all 134. And while this game's going on Saturday night, I will be at Houston Baylor, also keeping tabs on it. So that'll be a fun one in Houston with the blue out. The crowd's doing the blue out with the old Love You Blue from the Houston Oilers.
Okay. Very good. Cool stuff. All right, Steve. Appreciate you stopping by.
Thank you.